Yeah, so I mean, the point is like, okay, so in this main method right here, right, I was showing you, this is where your app starts. When your app starts, it has to decide what it wants to do, right? And right now I said, always just try to restore the session. And if that doesn't work, load the home page, right? What I could also then say is like, well, if I have a Kik message, actually, like, load something else, right? Like maybe the Kik message is supposed to be a specific image. So I say, load the image instead. And then if there's no Kik message, then let's do that, right? So this is the idea that like my app could be opened in a varying number of circumstances, one of which is from a message. So I sent a message, then when I opened it, I wanted to go to wherever. Well, it's going to go to the image page. I'm making an image search app. Users can send images to their friend. Well, what if I opened an image? Well, then let's load the image page with the data in the message.
But multiple people can be sending messages, right? So how do you know the one you're opening is the one you actually want?
What do you mean? Like the user sort of decides which one they're opening, right? And whichever one they open is the one they get. So like this message field is whichever message they open.
Oh, you're already inside that already.
Yeah, so I'm in a conversation right here. And this message right here in my conversation has data baked into it. And when I open this, it's going to open the image search app and then pass in whatever data was in this message. It doesn't matter if there were other messages in this conversation. It's this message that I'm trying to open that it's going to get. Yeah, and it lands right there. Yeah, so that's another.
I don't know. Are you looking at the my types automatically on the onboarding yet, or
the
message? Do we get a URL for the image, or you just open the image? Is there any?
Sorry, so you mean
so let's say we do our send messages back.
Yeah.
You send me an image. Right?
Yeah.
And in my browser or in my app, which is nothing but a browser, right?
Yeah.
Do I see a URL of the message, or I actually see the image? If you send me an image, you automatically open the image?
Yes, so I mean you can put whatever you want in this data field, and that's what you're going to get. So I mean if you put a URL in there, then you're going to get a URL back. Like it's exactly what's in this data field.
You don't open the URL, it's up to the user to click it and
open.
So let's say you sent me a photo.
Yeah. So whenever a message is sent from a website in Kik, when somebody else opens that message on the other side, it will open that same website, no matter what. So yeah, you can't like send messages that will open other websites, right? And then it's like once the website is open, it's sort of like, okay, how do we handle this message? And that's where this data comes in, right? And you can put whatever you want in there, and it'll sort of go. Yeah.
Is there a way someone can just upload the images as well? I have a local image, it's not a URL. Mm-hmm. They want to just upload the image?
Yeah. So we can do, like, okay, so if you look at the body of this image, right? So for example, this one right here has some bold text and then some other text, right? So this is the title and this is like the text. The stuff here at the top, right? This is the icon of the app. This is the title of the app. That you can't change. That's basically signifying to users that like this message came from an app, and this is what the app was. So image search will show image search, words with friends will show words with friends. Everything in here you can customize. You can say I want this title and this text, or I want a big image. Some of them show an image and then on the side and then some text and title. And that's what this is. This is saying, well, set the title, set the text, set the pic. Do I want it to be big, like a big photo, and only the photo, right? I can do that. So that's how the message looks, right? The data is about once the user opens the message, right? When they tap on the message and it opens your web app, like what happens then? And that's what data is. Like data we'll pass this data on to your web app, right? So this is all what you see, and then this is functionality, what you get. Yeah. Cool.
After we've created an app on the desktop, what's the process for actually viewing it inside the real Kik app? Is there like a developer mode or something?
Okay, I mean, there's a developer mode, but that's for, it's sort of unrelated. Okay, so I mean, Kik functions as a web browser, which means that like, it's the same as Chrome, right? If you have a URL to your app, yeah, no, like there's no like registration. Like it's a browser. APIs are just sort of sitting there. You can go at it.
But if I want to access, okay, so I can.
Yeah, for sure. So like I don't know if we have the one I'm working on right now, right? So I'm doing this image search thing right now. Wow, is it working? Oh, there we go. Yeah, I was running something else on that port before. Anyway, so I have an image search app right now. Like, if I want to have a button, let's say, okay, so we've been looking at, I don't know, which API do we want to do? Let's just do the send, right? And then in my populator, in my controller, I'm saying, you know, let's give this button, let's call it the send button, right? And then in here I'm saying find the send button, and then when somebody clicks on it, kik.send. No, nothing else. So like literally right here, I'm going to say title, test, text, test, and this will refresh, and it just works. Right? Like I just tap on it, it does exactly what it says. When I try to send it, it's filled in with whatever I did. Obviously, I should have a better message than that, but yeah, what I'm getting at is there's no registration, there's nothing, right? We've built all of our APIs from the perspective that users opt into everything.
What's that that you're running the simulator? Is that the Kik app is
Yeah. No, this is just the Kik browser. Like so, right in Kik. So if you got Kik on your phone. You don't. Yeah, so this is in lieu of demoing my actual phone. I'm running it here.
So the normal process is we have to test it on the
No.
device.
Sorry. We sort of jumped around the orders here. I was going through the UI stuff. We have a Chrome extension that does all of the stuff in the browser for you. So when you're going through the API docs in the section about debugging, it links to a Chrome extension. And so like I was running stuff here, you'll notice all of a sudden there's a new tab called Kik APIs, right? And that what that does for you is simulate all of the APIs. So for example, I'm just going to, using the command line, start calling APIs to see how they work. So I could say, you know, I want to get the user data and then log it. And like in Kik, I got that pop-up. Obviously, it doesn't look as nice, but I get the pop-up saying yes or no, and I say, no, I don't want to give it my data, so it logs undefined. Or I say, I do want to give it my data, and now it logs the user object with all of the data of my user, right? And in the same way, I could say send stuff, and on the right side, you saw it simulated sending a message, right? And I could, like if it had any data baked in, I could say, you know, show me the payload of this message and all that kind of stuff. But the idea is like almost everything we can do in our app, we can do inside of Chrome. And like the way our development flow normally works is that obviously we design everything in like Photoshop or SketchUp or whatever, but by the time we get to developing, we develop everything in Chrome. And when we feel like we're done, that's when we get some phones out. That's when we say, okay, let's get through all of the quirks that are on Android 2.2 devices or things like that. But for the most part, we can do almost everything in Chrome. Does it make sense?
So, for example, to test out my app being opened from a push notification?
Yep. Then you would say, let's put in the data of the push notification in here and trigger it, and then you test your app. And that's sort of it, actually. Okay. So yeah, I'll just cover push notifications and then get back to where we were. So yeah, probably the last major API we have inside of Kik is push notifications. The idea is that when your app runs, you can get the push token of a user, which will allow you to send push notifications to them. because push notifications are a pretty obtrusive thing to do. I guess the way they work is a bit light. You get the banner up here at the top, sort of gets replaced by the text. So you can set text that you want to be rendered up here in the push. And then also in the sidebar, you get a little dot next to it. I don't know what a good example of this is. I'm gonna play Words with Friends against myself. And then I'll get a push notification saying that it's my turn. Yeah. So you see the blue dot just showed up there. Oh, text showed up at the top saying, hey, it's your move in the game, right? So I open up the game and I say, do it. And what the app just did is said, it said, oh, we opened from a push message. Well, then what was it for, right? And it could just say, oh, wow, OK, so it's the game. What it also does is you can get push notifications while your app is running. And you can process them as the app is running. So if I'm playing this game and it gets a push notification, what it just really learned as well is that maybe we should refresh the board, right? Somebody probably played their turn. You get cool stuff like that. There are other apps for push notifications. There's so Pop is sort of a Twitter-ish app. Actually, this is not going to be helpful given that I probably don't have friends on here with my test account. But the idea is that, OK, let's say you were building Twitter, right? So I have tweets. I tweet something. I want my friend to find out. I don't want to send a message to them, right? That's just not what tweeting is all about. It's about broadcast. It's not about individual one-to-one messages. It would be kind of abusive to users almost if you were like, I'm building the Twitter app, and every time they try to tweet something, I'm going to bring up the send dialog to make them send stuff to their friends. Yeah, that's just not building the right product for users almost. And so what you'd likely want to do is send push notifications, right? So your friends would get that dot that get the text at the top, and the next time you open your app, it'd be like, oh yeah, let's render the new stuff. If you were sitting in your Twitter app and you got these push notifications, presumably you would just plop them in there, right? You'd see real time your tweets showing up. And so that's the general use case of our push notifications, which are so just signifying stuff's happening while they're outside of the app, and while they're in their app, getting a lot of this real-time stuff going on. And the way it works is really simple. You just grab the token from the client. You say, get me my token, and it'll give you your token. And then you pass it up to your server. And on your server, you say, I want to push this JSON to the user. Right? You say, this is the token that I got. This is the text that I want to have show up. Like you saw with Words for Friends, it says, somebody has played their move. Right? So this could have been anything like that that's context sensitive about why are we pushing to you right now? And then additionally, like with the message, there's this push data, which is we're going to push some stuff to the user. Well, if it's Twitter, maybe we pack the entire tweet in there. We said, this user said this, and we can render that fully. Yeah, and so we also have, again, a lot of the way this works is pretty robust. We have part of that Node library I was mentioning before. You can just literally have a function that says, here's the token, here's the text I want to show it, and here's the data, just send it. And it'll handle pushing it to the user, and it'll handle a retry logic and anything like that, just to make this more convenient. Yeah, so, I mean, these are the APIs and functionality that you'll get plugging into Kik. Probably the most important thing to look at for this is just sort of how that informs the app you want to make. Yep. Yeah, so what about the token?
Well, it's using the WebSocket kind of thing on the tower. You may talk into your Node server.
Yeah. So okay. So the token. Yeah. So the token is just a unique token for the user at this website, right? So that when you make the push later on, when you say, hey, api.kik.com, I would like to make a push, right? You can push to that token. And the user's push token might change. Like, for example, if the user revokes you from pushing to them, for like maybe they deleted your app, maybe you were being abusive and pushing too much, right? Your token could get invalid. And that's why it's not pushing to a username or pushing to anything like that. And because it's light and easily revocable, you actually don't need any permissions to get the push token either, right? Just because recourse is so easy. If you're pushing too abusive, well, I'll just delete your app. I don't care about it anymore, right? Yeah, and it also allows us to have push without giving away sensitive user data. So yeah, so I mean, what's the token? The token is just a way for api.kik.com to know which user and which website to send the push for.
So I kind of understand the APIs, but I still don't understand the end goal. Are we trying to create a native app that we can publish to App Store or open market, or are we trying to publish a native app to the Kik App Store? What is it?
No. So Kik is a browser, right? This is like probably the best analogy is like, you know, there are several mobile browsers out there, right? You could fire up Opera, you could fire up Safari, you can fire up Chrome, or if you're on Android, you can go on Dolphin or whatever all the alternatives are, right? And what we're saying is like, we think that you can make a browser that has a lot of the expectations and niceties of native apps, but it's still a browser, right?
So like when I download Kik, which is a browser similar to Safari, right?
Yeah.
And I can write my web applications.
Yeah.
Which has all those APIs.
So for example, I've been showing you like image search or something, right? Yeah. On this phone.
So
well,
that's what you're writing.
I can go to Safari and I'll be like, okay, well, let's go to. Oh my God, it's gonna make me type like this. Okay, well, let's do it. So yeah, like in Safari, I can go to the exact same URL and open it up. And the idea is that like lots of things will be the same, right? Because again, it is just a browser. Okay. But there are things about the Kik browsers that we think will be better, right? Like for example, all of this stuff at the top, right? The navigation UI at the bottom, right? All this stuff I was talking about like why do we build single page web apps? Because like we don't want all this browser Chrome, right? We want to be feature par with native apps. But like in general, it'll still work, right? I can be like, okay, let's search for test. Like this is the exact same app that we saw in there, right? Like it's all the same stuff. The only difference is like, okay, now I want to use this. It's like, well, obviously you can't kick something, right? You're not inside Kik.
So basically you're using app.js to build a mobile web app, and then you just basically drop it inside of the Kik browser to get all those push notifications and all the rest of the APIs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I mean.
Is there a reason why you're not using the platform-specific browsers? Like on the iOS, you can always send the browser into like the Safari, and then you package this as an app a little bit.
Oh, you mean this, like the add to home screen button?
Yeah, rather than having your Kik browser as an all together.
Well, I mean, along with the things we're trying to fix, which are like we wish browsers had push notifications in it. Like Firefox is pushing for that, and browsers will get it, but they'll get them one by. Well, it's a web view, right? So on iPhone, you're not allowed to ship a browser that doesn't use UI WebView. That's one of the App Store requirements. So even Chrome on iPhone is just shipping with UI WebView. Now, but UI WebView is like the rendering technology, right? That's about like how do things look, right? How do I render a web page? But everything surrounding that, which is like the browser, which Chrome has built in like their good network logic and stuff, right? Yeah.
So I saw the Kik was a messenger application, but there is a browser application also, right?
Yes. Well, it's all one thing, right? So.
I haven't played it, so I'm just.
Yeah, that's fine. So I mean that's okay. So this is Kik the messenger, right? Okay. And inside Kik we've integrated a browser, right? So yeah, there's the Messenger. I send messages to people. I can send all sorts of content. But I also want to send rich media. And a lot of times that's coming from apps. And what I'm sort of getting to is that like we think those apps should be web apps. And if we want them to be web apps, we think we need a browser. And we need a browser that is good for building high quality web apps, right? Because fundamentally, a user who looks at, at this is very different than this, right? They're the same app. They both have browsers, but like how a person uses them and what their expectations are very, very different. Does that make sense? Okay, so I mean, I worked through all the major APIs. I think what I'll get to is I'll finish most of the UI stuff. We'll eat some food after that, and then you guys can hack along on apps you're building, and Nick and I will sort of meander about and help you guys out. Does that make sense? All right, cool. Cool, so let me get back. Oh, also, yeah, while you guys are at it, you might as well just get the Chrome extension. It'll make your lives easier as you go. If you just go to the, if you click on the Kik API website, go to the API reference, and in the first section about debugging, there'll be a link to the Chrome extension. Okay. Cool. So, I mean, when you guys checked out the sort of app.js demo back here somewhere.
Just ask another question. So
yeah.
This Kik.sign basically signs the info. We have to use your Node.js library to kind of get at that.
No. So do you know what JWS is? JSON Web Signatures. Okay, so it's a way of wrapping up this sort of private key signing, right? Basically, you have some data, you want to sign it, and there's some metadata about what's going on. And all it does is sort of packages it up into one string, so you can pass it around very conveniently. And so
basically just like a convenience function, like
exactly. Yes, you could verify the signature on your own server without talking to Kik whatsoever, and that's perfectly fine. What we think is it's going to be easier from a development perspective to use our convenience stuff, right?
But then we need to use the equivalent stuff on the server too.
Well, so there are three different ways, right? You could verify signatures all by yourself. You could use the equivalent of the curl command I showed you, which is like in any language whatsoever, you could make the equivalent of that, right? It's just an HTTP request that you're making, right? So that's a convenience service that we have. And then the third one you can use is the Node.js convenience library that we have. That's the easiest. Like obviously, it's a scale of how easy it is as to how much control and how much you want to do. Definitely would not suggest manually verifying everything yourself, just because it's an easy thing to get wrong, and if you do get it wrong, like the implications are pretty bad. So probably the equivalent of curl is the best. If you're in Node, just use Node library. There's nothing easier than that. All right, so app.js, a bunch of UI stuff. You get lists like this for free, navigation stuff, like I was saying, like little small things like colors, buttons, dialogues. I wish I was running an Android. I'm going to go run an Android. So all of the same things on Android. So let's go to so I'm just going to run the same demo in Chrome. It's an Android, except this time transitions are different. This time the button looks different. The dialogues are different. It's all the same stuff, but just like by default, themed in a way that's easy, right? It also has convenience for infinite scroll. I've like right? So if you go through the docs, there's basically just a list of all of these little components. And for the most part, they're pretty easy to work with. One of the most interesting ones is the photo viewer, which we've sort of plugged into. I showed you the image search app. Like, that's actually the same cat that we went through. It's actually like very native feeling, right? So if I go back here, if I go back here, I search for my cat. So this is the image gallery. This is just a plugin for app.js. You just sort of drop in a script, write a tiny bit of code, and you get pages that sort of look like this, which is I've got a list of images that I can swipe between, right? And it works really well on the phone. Let's see if I can get pinch to zoom. It's kind of hard to show in here. There we go. So you get pinch to zoom working just fine. Obviously, it's a bit different in here. You might as well try it out on your phones to really get a feel for it. And it's really easy to do. It's just like I was showing you with those app pages before. You just define one that's like, this is my image viewer. And then you say, OK, for the controller, I'm just going to instantiate a photo viewer. And here are the URLs for the images that I want to render. And then it just sort of goes. And then, so I mean, like once I write this code once, anywhere in my app, I can just be like, yeah, loaded image gallery with these URLs, and that's sort of it. There's nothing more to it. Dialogues, again, like I've shown you descriptions for how these dialogues show up. They look different on iPhone and Android, but basic premise is like you're using these as action sheets or dialogues. So in general, like on iPhone, action sheets are, you get a choice of options of things that you want to do. And then the flip side is sometimes you just want a dialogue. I want to tell the user something and have them say OK, or tell the user something and have them say yes or no. Or in this case, it's like, this is the memes app, right? You try to upload an image, and it's like, well, your network seems to be bad. You can let them try again or cancel. All the lists. Infinite scroll. That's another important one. It's really just like a basic convenience library for automatically loading, dynamically loading stuff. Nothing really more than that. All it has to do is just like, whenever it thinks it needs to load stuff, you can asynchronously fetch stuff, like dump it in, right? And you can tell it to stop whenever you want. Yeah, it's fairly simple. Yeah. So, I mean, what I was getting to at the start was like, you guys should really be building these apps. At this point, is everybody comfortable sort of starting to work on their own apps? Is anyone not comfortable starting to work on their own apps itself? Or are you saying data binding as in your controller hooking up to? OK. OK, so yeah, that's. So yeah, I said before that like this app.js stuff sort of comes from the perspective of like the model view controller stuff. But if you notice, there's no model code or whatever in any of this. This is like very much a view controller, because most people who have built web apps before already have some sort of library that they're keen on using in terms of doing models type stuff. Like a lot of people love Backbone or like whatever you really want, and you could sort of do that. And this, in general, won't really get in the way of that, as long as the integrations of your model are coming through your controller. So probably a good example here is, so I'm going to show you maybe, what should I build? I'm just going to make a list, actually. Let's do that. And normally with a list, I'd go, well, you know, item 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I go into here, I've got my various items, right? But obviously, I don't want to hard code my list, right? That's sort of not very useful. I'd rather have some sort of dynamically generated list based off some data. So in my controller, right here, in my controller, I'll say, like, maybe I have a function somewhere that's like fetch list, Like this is now just getting very basic, right? And this might return something, right? Maybe it's going to return item 1. Right? So disregard this function, right? Because this is what I was saying, where like your data might come from anywhere, right? And I don't know where it's coming from, and it doesn't really matter. But you have your list, right? And then you probably want to do something like, well, fetch stuff, and then I get the list data back, and then for each piece of data, so now this is me just taking some data that I have, right? Let's create a list item who has text as the item or something like that, and then I'm just going to append it to the list. So now, if we just go back to this code, oh, right, I had stuff in the DOM already. Let me just clean up my original mess. OK, so in here, this prints out 3 things, right? All I've done at this point is say, have a function that says, like, let's render the list, right? Let's go fetch some stuff from the server somewhere, perhaps, and then go render the list. What I could do before that is empty the list, right? Before rendering it, I'm going to empty it. In this case, that doesn't really make a difference because the list was already empty. Where it starts to make a difference is if I create a function called like render list, right? So what does render list do? It goes and fetches the list from somewhere and then starts rendering things inside the list, right? So in my code, I say render the list. Again, doesn't do anything, right? It's the same old stuff. Where it gets interesting is what does fetch list do, and under what conditions do I render the list? For example, if I had a model layer somewhere, maybe I'm using Backbone or something, right? And I've got item, actually, let's make this more generic, right? I got a model layer somewhere, right? It could be anything, right? And the idea is that we're going to keep our model layer separate from everything. Like we don't want any of our UI to be, or we don't want our model to be dependent on our UI in any sort of way. The controller could depend on the model, and that's totally fine. But the model is sort of its own thing. And so we'd say, hey, I have a model on update or something. So we'll bind to the model using eventing. And we'll say, when the model updates, let's render the list, right? And normally, it's just sort of as simple as that. We say render the list now when the page loads, and then if the list ever like if the model ever updates, also render the list again. And then the code comes in and says, OK, let's fetch the list, right? Let's see if there are any updates. We can go like that. Fetching the list presumably would be something more like, in my model layer, I say get the list, right? And then maybe we call back with the list that I got from my model layer, right? So this right here, it's like could be any model, like data modeling library.
So it's one controller per page.
And then this right here, same thing. Yeah. So in your HTML, you've defined what a page is, and each one of those has an associated controller. But you can instantiate multiple of the same page, right? So if you have a page called home, maybe you have 3 of them, right? Maybe you loaded one and then another and another. If it's called home, it's very unlikely that you're trying to do that, right? But in the docs, like the main example was maybe you have a contact page, right? Like for example, if you're I don't know, on Twitter, right? And I'm on your profile, I see your tweets. Maybe I tap on, somebody retweeted your tweet, so I tap on their profile picture. Now I'm on their profile. Logically in our code, profiles are an HTML element that we've defined, right? We have a controller called app controller profile, right? And it'll take in this thing. But we'll create different pages for each one of your profiles, right? I'm saying I'm going to create a profile page for you. Then I'm going to create a profile page for him. I'm going to create a profile page for me. And all of that might be alive at the same time. And so we'll actually run these this controller multiple times for each one of them.
And it knows to find that because of the data dash page.
Sort of, right? So, I mean, I have a home page, and the reason you see, oh, right, I have a bunch of things called model in my code that don't exist. So, the reason you see the home page, or don't see the home page, there. Now, the reason you see the home page is somewhere in my code I said app.load home, right? That's like the most basic thing in app.js, which is the how do I load a page? Now, I just sort of loaded the page generically, and every time you load this page, it's presumably going to do the same thing, right? Unless my model layer changes for some reason, right? So I say this page is always bound to the model layer. But what if this is not get list? What if this is get, get a specific list? Maybe it's getting the home list. Maybe we have multiple lists now, and this page is supposed to render any list, but this time it's supposed to render the home or something, right? It's kind of like with your profile, right? It could render any profile, but this time it's rendering your profile, or this time it's rendering his profile. And so we need to get this from somewhere. Like, why would we hard code home, right? That's kind of crazy. So we did app.load. I'm going to change this entirely from now on. Let's go back to the contact. You know what? I'm just going to bomb all of this now. Cool.
So that load is really looking up whatever you declare the controller to be?
Whatever you declare the controller to be.
Or is it actually looking at the data page?
Data page. So the data page right here that says contact, that needs to match whatever's in here. Okay. And that's how this controller is mapped to that HTML element.
That's what I was asking.
Okay, yeah. I'm just going to show you a quick thing about data, though. Okay, so all I'm doing is I created a page. I called it contact. And it's got two things on it, a first name and a last name, right? I'm just going to pretend like that's the only thing about a person's contact that we care about. And so in here, I'm saying if I want to load a contact page, I have to give it a contact. I have to give it a person's first name. I'm going to call it Joe. And I have to give it his last name. Let's call it Fire. And when the page runs, I can say, well, find the first name and set it to the contact's first name. And find the last name and do the same thing, right? So again, our controller, all it's doing is setting up the page. And this time we're setting up based on the contact, right? So again, this is kind of static, right? It's not binding to any model or anything like that. It's dynamic in that we can, when it gets instantiated, it gets set up with different data. But once it's set up, it doesn't really change. So if you look at the code, shit, I'm not supposed to have that there. Okay, so if you look at the code, I can say, load the contact page for, Fred Smith. It's going to load the page, dump in their names in there. Great, right? So that's how we dynamically sort of set up the page. What's more interesting is, what if this wasn't contact? What if this was username? So now I'm saying, somewhere in my code, I'm going to say, set up the contact page for a person whose username is Frank, right? But I don't know what his first or last name is. All right? I'm just saying for this username, like this is like the Twitter example, right? Let's go to his profile. All right? I know what his username is, but I know nothing else about him. And the idea is that, well, then the controller's job is to, like, given the username, interface with our data layer and render the page properly. And then if anything changes, keep it up to date, right? Oh, I got a tweet, it came in. Well, then we need to update this list and put it in there. So what I would do is instead of rendering it like this, now this thing is now called render contact. We can't render the contact immediately because we don't know anything about him, right? So what would we do first? We'd say model layer dot like fetch contact, by username, and this could be asynchronous or something like that.
Can we pull information out about the user's friends without going through the friend picker?
You mean like that? No. This is just an example of like this fetch contact could have come from your server. It could have come from anywhere. This is like whatever your model layer was.
Yeah.
This is just like interface with it and get the data that you need.
App.love is a little bit mysterious to me, actually. So you're passing in the JSON.
Yep.
What does that piece of information gets turned into?
Okay, so you see the controller up here?
Yeah.
It's got a page and data. So the page is this HTML element right here.
How does it know?
It just happens. That's the so this HTML, it gets set up, it gets cloned, and the whole idea of the controller is let's take that HTML element and really set it up for dynamic things that it needs to do. And this data is exactly this JSON object right here.
Okay.
Right? So you're saying I want to load the contact page with this JSON data. Well, the controller is going to say, okay, let's load this page with this data.
So I can have like data 1, data 2, and then you would just chain them onto the loads?
Yeah, so I want to load Frank, and then I want to load Joe, and then Jim, right? Like I could do all of these, and when this code runs, when it goes fetch contact, these are different usernames now. So it has to go and fetch a different guy's thing, and then render it differently, depending on that.
Like the number of parameters to load, can it be like username Frank, username?
Oh no, it has to be. Yeah, you can only pass in a single object right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Try URL protection.
Right. So normally this is how we sort of do it. We say like this is like sort of the general formula, which is like when the page loads, immediately try to render stuff. When the data updates, try to render it again, right? And now your controller is sort of plugging in with the read access into your model layer, right? Presumably, okay, what if I had a button? What if my button, had to change my first name or something? You could have, find the button, and then on click, do something. Maybe that do something is model that, set first name or something, right? And then based on some data in the DOM. But the idea is that like any access to or from the model layer is from here. We don't do it anywhere else. Yeah, another interesting thing is right here. This is on update, right? The model layer's lifecycle likely is like probably the entire app, right? Like when your app loads to when the user leaves. Your page, not so much. We might leave the page, like I went to see this contact, then I went back, right? Maybe I'm going to do other things now. And this page is supposedly supposed to have been destroyed, right? Because I'm not there anymore. So then if this is binding to something that's persistent, well then we're still bound to it. And which, from a JavaScript perspective, like this code is still running. This code's not done. So we need something in our code to sort of like unhook it from this global object, right? Because this model thing is this global data thing. And so what you can do is sort of just say, when the page is about to die, right? This is kind of like cleanup. This is like it's like the opposite of a constructor, right? So when we created the page, we said, listen for updates, right? And now I'm saying, and then when we're destroying the page, stop listening to updates.
That app destroy, is that's something that's specific to the behavior of your app page?
Yep.
It's not in like jQuery?
No, not at all. So all of the custom app.js events will start with app. There'll be app something, right? So if you go into the docs, there'll be there's app show, hide, destroy, ready, and a bunch of different ones based on different framework-specific stuff. And so all of it is prefixed with the app. The same way the CSS classes, all of the custom ones are prefixed with app. And yeah, obviously the JavaScript, every app.js stuff starts with app.something. Yeah.
Can there be multiple controllers attached to a page?
To a single page?
Yeah.
Not really. I mean, the only reason I can think of that you're trying to do that is you're trying to abstract some of the behaviors out.
Like a common controller?
Yeah. So that's what it sounds like. Well, an interesting thing is, so this controller is just a function, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me contact controller.
It is a little bit like Angular.
Yeah, so now I'm going to do this. So this is the same thing, right? I haven't really changed anything. I just took the function and defined it elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
I probably want to do it in this order to be a nice person.
Okay.
But I mean, what you're getting at is like, what if, different controllers could inherit from the same base or something like that, right? Or what if I could have a mix-ins where I'm like, well, I have this controller and that controller, and they share a trait, but they're really different in lots of other fundamental ways. These functions are actually classes. I've been using them as functions the whole time just because it's just nicer from a code perspective. But in general, you can use this as a class. Under the hood, somewhere in the code, somebody's going to run this with the page and the data.
And that's the same thing.
Right? And what that means is you can have somewhere else in your code my base controller, right? And then if you have your own particular blend of JavaScript inheritance, like there are tons of different libraries that do that. Obviously, JavaScript doesn't come built in with anything like that, but if you're using, I don't know what the best examples are, but they're always treated as mix-ins, basically, right? So even if you wanted to do this, where you said, take my contact controller and extend it with the base controller, right? So I've created a contact controller, and what I want to do is make sure that it has all the features of the base controller, and then I might overwrite some of them later, right? So now all of my different controllers for my different pages, they could inherit from this guy if they wanted to, right? And we could have some of our base logic in there if we wanted to. The other thing about that is, so let me just kill this for a second. If we're going to really treat these like classes, we can actually go the whole way and say, instead of eventing, like app destroy, we can actually just do it like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can sort of go the whole way and say, you know what? Unbind render contact. Actually, no. It's called. Here, I'm just going to totally destroy this now. I'm going to make this class oriented entirely. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of object-oriented JavaScript, but it is doable if you really want it. So this code is exactly the same as it was before. I've created a controller. This is the constructor. It calls the render function and then binds the renderer. On destroy, it unbinds the renderer, right? And the render function is now just one of the class methods, right? And fundamentally, it does the same thing. This is actually broken because the username's not there. So I could actually instead do this.username and pass that in instead. So this is another option if you really, really are keen on inheritance and all that kind of stuff.
It looks really bloated.
Yeah, that's exactly why I don't do that by default. It's an option because some people are like, if you come from particular backgrounds. Like if you come from Java or something like that, and then you're learning JavaScript, the other way of doing it just seems very dirty. Like it feels like you're doing it the wrong way, right? And honestly, everything's convention. So if you want to do it this way, it's up to you. If that makes your code, like makes you understand your code better, then that's a good thing. For me, I definitely am the other way around, where I find that this gets more and as you go down the rabbit hole with this, it gets more and more abstract to the point that you're creating classes and you're just like, what does this do? This is something really, really oddly specific, and you're being less expressive, and it's harder to quickly iterate.
The closure, because I've seen code where they say like that is equal to this.
Yeah.
And then further down is like.
Yeah, that's like variable naming. That's a bad world of its own. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this can definitely. I mean, depending on how you like to write code, this can definitely make things nicer though. This definitely makes things easier to test, right? So yeah, the other aspect of it is like if you're really keen on testing your code, which you should be. If I wanted to test this, right now, I could say in real life I run this code, but in test world, I say let's create a controller, right? Let's pass in, fake page, and let's pass in fake data, right? And then my test framework can have expectations of what should happen when I call, controller.something. I say, oh, I called controller dot render contact. Well, I expect something to happen on the controller. And so we can inspect that and test it in a much easier way. Mostly because we can pass in our dependencies in here, and we can say, I'm going to forcefully pass in like a fake DOM node, or I'm going to forcefully pass in specifically fake data.
Right, for testing.
Yeah. No. Yeah, there are lots of nice test frameworks that make this easy. Like, have you used any JavaScript test frameworks at all?
I have not.
So probably good ones to look at are like Mocha. So Mocha is just the general framework for running your tests. There are lots of opinionated ways of actually doing the specific tests themselves. There's like should and shy and yeah. It's like how do you want to specify basically. There are a million ways and everybody has their own opinions on it. So pick the one that you love the most. So, yeah, as long as you're testing, that's good. All right, cool.
On this code.kik.conf, is there just like a kind of a, not these example stuff guides, but more of an index to all the functionalities?
What functionality are you looking for specifically?
Just like everything on the page.
So all of that's part of app.js.
So just look at the code.
No. So if you go to the, do you have the page of links that I sent?
Yes.
If you click on app.js website,
Yes.
it'll take you to this page.
Yeah.
And you just click on docs. Right? And this has everything all on one page. So if you're looking for stuff specific on how the controllers work.
Oh, that's everything?
Oh yeah, this is a nice, it's got screenshots and it's got a cat on it. You know it's good. Probably the part you're interested in is probably this controller section. It's got a full rundown of different events, how the controllers work, how the navigation stack works, how to mess with the navigation stack, and all that kind of stuff.
So the point of using this is so that when the page shows up in a mobile browser, it knows how to respond.
Yep. Yeah, partially. Yeah, I mean, if you go through this demo right up here, that's probably the easiest one. Switching between the iOS and Android mode, even if you take a live app like this one, switching between them and seeing, what's the different ways that they act. That's really the sell. It's like we can take arbitrary pages and sort of create this app-like world out of them, but still leaving the door for you to customize almost everything. Like on this page, the only non-custom part of this is the top bar and like the scrolling content area. Obviously, everything in here is custom. Inside here, same deal, right? Top bar is all part of the framework, but like this right here, this is a canvas. Here, let me show you. Right? All this stuff. Yeah, the point of this app is create a meme, right? Ta-da. So, and then you can send it to your friend. But yeah, like in general, like people are making products. Like like this content area, that's where you do the thing that's special to your app. So the more particular the framework is about stuff in that spot, like the less creative you're likely going to be about that. And the things that are very particular to like what do apps look like is usually just the top bar, these transitions, that's the kinds of things that the framework is going to try to take care of.
I think the problem with server is no, we're struggling loading the videos.
Oh.
And I think it's the Node server that I probably built in. It probably not even serve the.
Where are you serving the videos from?
Static resource. Maybe you serve images fine, like JS fine, CSS fine, but you're not taking care of the MP files and all the.
Maybe.
Session coding.
Yeah.
Well, technically should serve them the way they are.
It sort of should, yeah.
Because like I'm trying to.
Can't imagine why not.
Right now, right? It's not really getting it. Try to. Is there a restriction on file sizes?
Nope. I'll do whatever you want.
I try loading the regular one, directly, but if I do this one.
All right. Yeah.
Because it's probably a small one, right?
That is exactly what I was going to get to right now. How many people actually feel like they've built an app at this point? Progress? No? Yeah, define an app. I feel like... No, it's more like a search engine. Yeah, so inside the app we have a search bar. Users can go find stuff. Yeah, because you can't buy apps or anything like that, right? That's not, yeah, websites. Yeah, so native apps, that's sort of how they work. You can go to the store and you can buy this app. Websites, anyone can go to any website. Everything's usually service oriented, right? You go to the website and they're like, once you're there, maybe you buy something, or once you're there, maybe you subscribe to something of their service.
So this is a way for...
This is just, we just list out all the websites that are out. Yeah.
But you still have to point it to the service.
What do you mean?
You still have to point it, right? Like giving
yeah, it's just links, right? We just have this thing that's got a bunch of links to a bunch of websites. The best way to think about it is we have search in our sidebar. That's search. You just search for websites and you get them. And then we have the listing that's more like, I don't know if you remember what Yahoo was like back in the day, which is like, Yahoo would just be like, oh yeah, we have a directory of a bunch of apps that we think are cool. Like that's basically what that is. Yeah. Cool. If you looked at the starter, I guess you didn't use the starter kit, but in the starter kit, we basically lock the viewport down. We set it to like 100% of the screen size, and then we say user can't manipulate it. There are a couple options there. Most of the time, we just don't want the user to play with it. But the real questions are like, do you want it to be like, so pixel density of the screen is really what's going to mess you up. So you choose, do you want it to be the full screen, or do you want it to be literally pixel for pixel what the phone advertises, right? So for example, I have a Nexus 5, and that's 1080p. So it's 1920 by 1080. But if I set my viewport to say, fill the height and width, it's actually going to report to me in CSS that it's like height is, I forget what it'll say. It's like 720 or something like that. It's like 720 by 480 or something like that. because it's also going to say its pixel density is 3 times, right? An iPhone is pixel density 2 times or something like that, right? And we generally want to stick to that just because to support all these phones, it's kind of like you get into weird situations where, well, I made an icon and it needs to show up right on all these different devices. If you make your icon right for an iPhone, let's say you said, like, I want it to be exactly pixel for pixel the iPhone, and then you want to run that on your Nexus 5, right?
Everything to be like 100 units and then just use 100 to everyone.
Oh, so you're saying like fixed width or something like that?
Yeah, width equals 100.
You can do that. Yeah, so in the viewport, you can just say device width equals, and then pick a number. In general, you don't want to do that just because what you get is pixelated output, like just blurring on every device that's not exactly that. So you might pick like 320 because like, okay, that'll work for iPhone. And then every Android you run is just going to be this big blurry mess. Yeah. So yeah, the one that comes with it, basically it's just saying just fill the screen. Your app should fill the width. And in general, like that tends to work out pretty well. The only times that you get any sort of struggles are like if you're trying to build something where you have a canvas that fills up the entire screen. So changing the size of a canvas, changing the size of an HTML element in the canvas is fine. But when you change the size of the canvas context, like on some Android devices, it'll just like wipe the entire canvas, right? So you have to go through another like render cycle. So it's like once you choose the size, like be diligent about keeping it that way. But what that also means is that up front you have to like not have a fixed size. You have to like when the app runs, like check out where we're at and then size the canvas based on what's right. And then your code's going to have to think about that and be like, well, maybe we should fix the aspect ratio and center it or something because, you know, there are all sorts of weird aspect ratios phones. All right, cool. All right, so I think everybody's made a fair amount of progress at this point. Just, you know, it's getting late at this point, but just before we get any deeper, I just want to run you guys through. He was asking about how do I get my app to show up in search and in the leaderboard. So if we just go back to this, basically he's saying, so I'm searching for something, like maybe I search for YouTube. Well, maybe I have a YouTube app of my own. How do I make it show up in these search results? Or we have these top sites, right? How do I make it show up in this leaderboard? These are all of the most popular ones. How do I get to be one of those? These are the most recently released ones. How do I show up here? And it's actually quite simple. The way it works is this, that like we have a search engine and we have a crawler that just goes out and finds these websites, and we do some sort of analysis of like how good we think these apps are. Right? We look at like, well, this app takes 30 seconds to load. Clearly, it's not that great, right? Or things like that. We take them into account to sort of create a score out of it, and then we rank it. And the ranking in the leaderboard, so this one, is mostly based on user feedback. So it's like, you know, how popular is this amongst users? Do users actually share this? Like, do users actually like your app? And then based on that sort of behavior, we'll rank all of these things. But the most basic part of it is how do I get into search, right? Because that's sort of the door to all of this other stuff. And then that's going down the line of getting users, which is the web's all about. So if you just go into our guide, it's actually quite simple. It's actually, you've probably done almost all of this at this point. The requirements are you need to have a title in your app. You're probably done with that. You need to have a description. Like you might already have one. I mean, you can put something very simple. The description and the title are the things that are going to show up here, right? Like this app's called Video Kik. It has a description that's like, you know, send a video of any length. It needs to have an icon as well. So like you saw, when it's running in Kik, in the sidebar, it has an icon. Well, we have a tag here on how to set the icon. And then finally, it needs to run the Kik script, right? Websites, so I didn't show this earlier, but for example, you could go to google.com and Kik. Like I said, it's just a browser. But websites that are not optimized for Kik will sort of get this browser Chrome. And the idea is that, like when I was explaining before, it's like, why do we make static single-page apps? So we can go full screen, right? we want apps to really take up the phone and really take advantage of all of the things the phone can offer. And part of that is owning their own navigation stack and getting those smooth transitions. Well, like something like Google.com will actually navigate between different URLs, right? It'll load a new page. It's not really doing that. So it needs the browser's back button. It needs the browser Chrome. Otherwise, it won't really work. I'll go to another page and I have no way of getting back, right? So we can't exactly do that unless they're like, no, I'm going to opt in to being this full screen app. And so by doing that, by adding all this stuff up, you basically will show up in search. You have to add in this canonical tag, which is a standard search engine thing. It basically says you might have multiple versions of your app, right? You might be hosting it at different URLs. Maybe you have your test one, and then you have the actual one. Maybe you loaded your app with a query string that had your UTM campaign. It's your advertising campaign data plugged into the URL. But the canonical tag says this is the actual URL of my app, right? It doesn't matter what URL actually loaded. This is the real version. So if the search engine is going to index anything, this is the one it should index. And so Kik's engine does the exact same thing. Kik's engine, we just go out, look at these apps, and if you tell us this is the real version of your app, that's where we'll go. So once you plug in all of these things, it'll take whenever the crawler goes out and finds it, you'll just show up in the search, and you'll show up in the leaderboard and in the news section. Yeah, so it's actually as simple as that. Yeah, so all of that information is right on the website and the link that is on the page I sent out. I don't know how many of you guys are close to being able to list yourself. I see maybe 2 or 3 of you guys getting there. Hopefully somebody gets out there before we go today. But yeah, I mean, other than that, there's really nothing more to it to getting out there. Everything's automated. All right, cool. All right. All right. So how many of you guys think you'll be able to finish an app in the next 20 minutes? I got 1. You got 2? 2. All right. All right. I'll give you guys 20 minutes, and then we'll close up, and then we'll still hang around, but everybody's free to do as they please.